Hello, everyone. Today is May 25th, 2021, and this is the recording of the Zoom meeting that occurred tonight. Just a hair. There we go. Here we go. And put it on my YouTube page for the people that couldn't make it tonight to review. So tonight's topic I chose was memorization tips. And the reason why I chose it is because it seems to me that I have seen a lot of essays where the rule statements were not complete. And it's really kind of crucial that if a rule statement is out there, that it actually be somewhat accurate. And so I've got some examples of, let's talk about rules. One, for example, common law murder, it has a mens reis and actus reis requirement of a killing of a human being, and it's usually unlawful, of course, with malice. And so if you don't have that rule statement down and you get a criminal essay and it talks about murder and you don't know common law murder and you don't know about modern jurisdictions have first, second, and third degree murders in some jurisdictions, and that they have deliberation and premeditation as kind of congruent with common law murder, then you're kind of SOL. And if you don't know that that malice has 4 types of malice, meaning intent to kill, intent to serious bodily injury, the felony murder rule, which requires a felony, during the perpetration of a felony that a death occurs, or depraved heart, you just lost a whole bunch of points. So the analysis portion cannot even be done if your rule statement is not complete. So how do you go about determining how to memorize all of these rules? Well, number one, you have to sit down and say to yourself, I can't memorize all the rules. And once you come to that term, then you have to say to yourself, I need to memorize enough of the rules so that I can write a proper essay. And I always go back to the lectures didn't do me any good. So for those of you that are audio learners that can learn everything by someone telling you it, that doesn't work for me. 40% of the time, I don't pick it up. I need to be visual. So that's where flashcards sometimes come in. But I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to take one thing that I did when I did Bar Exam Doctor that helped me tremendously, and I'm going to share my screen now, is I had these books from, and I hope you can see my screen. Can you see the table of contents? Okay, so right now I've got Civil Procedure up on my screen. And the reason that I have my Civil Procedure table of contents up on the screen is I wanted to share with everyone that if you can copy your table of contents from your Civil Procedure, you can go right down the page and you can write your rule statements. Why is that important? Because if you write your rule statements and you come up to a statement, a rule that you don't know about, and this is where my conversation is going, is the definition of complaint, because you get a Civil Procedure essay that says the court denied the motion to dismiss because I'm sorry, let me start again here. The defendant filed a motion to dismiss because there was a failure to state a claim in the complaint, and the court denied that motion. Was that motion proper? Well, how are you going to know that if you don't know the elements of what a complaint is, and you don't know the elements of the motion to dismiss? So you have to know that the complaint, and in civil procedure, it's relatively the same as with federal rules of evidence. I mean, federal civil procedure code. In California, they're identical. The complaint is, you have to ID the parties. You have to have a statement, a general statement of claim, whether it be negligence or whatever against the defendant. You have to have a prayer for relief, and you have to sign it. So that's your complaint. And if they fail to state a claim and your claim is negligence, then that should trigger in your mind that there were not sufficient facts in the complaint to have a negligence suit. And you all know that negligence is duty, breach, causation, damages, and no defenses. So basically, the plaintiff is charged with putting all that, and it might be a short, plain statement, but it still has to have all the elements. And the reason is because according to notice pleading, which is under FRCP 8, and the majority of the jurisdictions, the sufficient facts have to provide your opposing party reasonable notice of the claims being asserted. So how do you remember all of that? That's a mouthful, right? Well, you've got a couple of ways to do that. You can buy flashcards. You can make your own flashcards. But you got to memorize that rule if you want to be able to answer a question on the motion to dismiss because failure to state a claim. So I suggest that you use the outline of your bar review materials and or the table of contents of your materials. And I suggest that you just go down the page and write your rules. And anything that you don't know that you can't write your rules for, if you don't have flashcards on them, make your own. And it's really relatively simple. So for complaint, you would have complaint on one side on a sticky note, and then on the back side, you would have what the 4 elements of a complaint need to be, which is ID the parties, the statement. I already forgot the third one. Oh, prayer for relief, you know, what you're looking for, and then it has to be signed. That's it for a complaint. So you could put complaint and you could put a little number 4 underneath it, knowing you have 4 elements to meet it. So what else can you do? Say you get burnt out and you've learned all these rules and there's some rules that are just not sticking. Like you're forgetting the 4 malices of murder. Then I'm going to tell you that you make a recipe. And what's a recipe? Okay. Well, you know, when you go to bake a cake, you have all these ingredients. You've got dry and wet ingredients. So make a recipe. Say that murder has actus reus and mens reus on one point. You know, it's got to be an act, whether it's an actual act that they did or it's a result like the felony murder. It's got to be there. So you've got that's your meat, that's your dry, and then you've got the malice, and you've got the 4 ingredients for malice. Some people sing songs. I knew a guy that played the guitar that passed the bar the first time, and he sung his rule statements while he was playing the guitar on the beach. So you can do something like that, or you can group things together. Like with intentional torts, all the intentional torts have to have a volitional act. And so if you know that battery has to have a volitional act, and false imprisonment and assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress, you know that you've got to have that volitional act no matter what. Where negligence, it doesn't really require a volitional act. It requires a breach of a duty of care. So those are things that you need to distinguish in your head and then break them down and digest them. If you have something like class action lawsuits, and you know that there's a whole bunch of terms that you have to know, like numerosity, or the plaintiff has to be in that one jurisdiction, not all of them. You have to, or commonality, you have to be able to list all those things. And if you can't remember them, then you're not going to get the points that you can get. The whole point that I'm trying to make is to get these rules memorized. And okay, say that you forgot complaint, or you forgot failure to state a claim on the motion to dismiss. Well, then go review civil procedure questions that have those rules in them. And what I mean is, go ahead and do them. If you go ahead and do those essays, and you come to a question where it says, was the court correct in denying the motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim, you can turn around and you can say, okay, I don't know, and answer the rest of the question. And then when you go to review your answer and the released answer, you can see what is written. And I suggest you type it. And the reason I suggested it helps in two areas. It increases your typing speed, and it also gives you the rule statement of a passing answer. And then you can incorporate, then you can talk about it in your head, or you can sing it, or you can put a Post-it note on your refrigerator. Just all those different ways to learn those rules, because those rules are what pass the essay, because you get the issue, the rule, and then you got to analyze it. And if you have all the elements and you see them in the fact pattern, then it just flows. And you can say, yeah, all these elements were met. And lastly, with your conclusion, always use the word because. Therefore, the court ruled correctly because all the elements were presented in the plaintiff's action, so denial was correct. I mean, that's the because basically shows the grader that you understand that your issue was either met or not met. And if you just say, yeah, the court will find the defendant guilty, the grader's going to go, well, why? I have to go back up and read why? No, just put it down in your conclusion. It takes you, 10 seconds to just say that, because all the elements were met in my analysis, or because all of the requirements for the pleading was met. So that's all I have to say tonight. I know that Todd's got some stuff to say, so I'm going to let Todd take it over at 6:14. All yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm Todd from Bar Exam Doctor. I'm going to type my website again right here. As you know, Jennifer had used our course a few years back, and she successfully eventually passed the bar exam. And we're an online bar review course that we're mainly focused on writing for essays and performance tests. We're one of the first bar reviews where you could write the full essay and or PT completely on the website. Now it's more acceptable in terms of the bar exam, how it's completely online. So we were a bit ahead of our time. Focusing in on what some of Jennifer's points that she brought up, memorization obviously is very important, and mnemonics are really important. We're big fans of those. Jennifer might have my chart that we created years ago with the body. And what we did is we knew this. We knew that students struggled with trying to kind of figure out what to say at the right time, at the right moment. Because when you're under the stress of it all, the actual bar exam, everything in window. I mean, like, your brain is just like, you're crazy. It is not like, sorry, excuse my language, but it's not like you're prepared, right? The stress that you're in, the actual moment, the actual writing at that moment, it's a whole different world. So everything you can do to properly prepare through mnemonics and through other ways, so you have it like the back of your hand, is better, okay? You don't want to just wing it at the moment, okay? So for mnemonics, we're big fans of mnemonics, and I would suggest have a mnemonic almost for every single major thing that you're going to talk about. And there are out there. I mean, we've made some. You can make some of your own. You can download a million off a million charts. You can Google mnemonic and put what you're trying to do. If you want to do the Mr. Dog for contracts or property or any of the others, there's a million out there, okay? there's no shortage of mnemonics. The funny part is that there might be just certain ones that you can remember more, that you can remember, that you can memorize, that work for you. That's what's more important. So it's important to know that mnemonics are not a bad thing, okay? We're big fans of those, and you should have it down. I mean, look, we know that through analyzing past essays and PTs, there's about 5 to 7 major subjects, major areas that they test on for all the essays, right? So you can then go and say, okay, so for the 5 to 7 of those, I'm gonna have a mnemonic for each of those. So like you can have a mnemonic for defamation. You can have a mnemonic for, I mean, most people have a mnemonic for, let's say, negligence and torts, but for the other ones, let's say for the remedies, as she's pointing out, there's a mnemonic for specific performance. There's all these different things. There's a mnemonic for generally approaching an essay, and don't forget to conclude, right? So mnemonics are really important. So yeah, we're big fans of mnemonics, and mnemonics are really good things that that basically help you kind of get through the tough parts, right? So like, for example, you might have a worry moment when you're writing an exam and the actual bar exam, and you can't remember anything, right? But if you just calmly sit back for a second and you just think back to your sheet where maybe you wrote down the mnemonics, right, for the major subject area, and you can just go back calmly and think through it, okay? Because I guarantee you it's in the back of your head. And it's just getting to that spot in the stress of the actual bar exam. Sometimes you might not remember all the letters of your mnemonic, right? So maybe you remember 3 or 4. So write them down or type them on your screen and then go back to it. I guarantee you it's going to come back. If you did proper studying, then you should be able to go back, and don't get flustered that you can't remember that 4th one. It will come back to you. I guarantee you. When you're writing on the other thing, it's going to, oh, that's right. Your brain's still trying to figure out what it was as you're writing on the next thing. Now, what's important is to stay calm and to know that, look, if you study properly, look, right now we are basically May, so we have basically a little bit left in May. We've got all of June and we got a lot of July, right? So that's approximately 8 or so weeks left of studying, right? A lot of our students have already written maybe 5 or 10 essays at this point. If you haven't written essays, you should start at this point. You should be doing about at least one essay a week at this point, maybe 2 if you can, and at least 1 PT every 2 weeks at this point. You know, and look, if you're going to be writing at this point, you also should have your outlines that you have done. And going back to mnemonics, as Jennifer is pointing out, whatever you can make on your own is going to be more beneficial than you copying someone else's, right? So if someone says, oh, can I have your outlines? Or look, we don't care. I literally have our outlines on the internet. Like, I don't care. That's not our value. Our value is that you're writing and you're getting good qualified feedback by our graders, and you're learning from your experience, okay? Now, look, every outline out there has some sort of mnemonics, so it doesn't really matter. But at the same time, what you should have basically by the next week or so, by June 1st, you really should have at least a one-sided sheeted piece of paper for every single subject of the buzzwords, right? So as Jennifer is pointing out in the book, when she's looking over the outlines, she's looking at the table of contents. You can find the majorly tested areas, right? So each of those areas are most likely going to be the test areas on the essays, right? Then you're going to take the buzzwords that you've memorized and maybe through mnemonics, and you're going to write them down. You can actually just write your mnemonic if you can memorize it at this point. Look, a lot of our students at this point, their issue is not memorization. That's not the problem. It's handling the stress of the actual bar exam. It's basically knowing a little bit of everything and not going crazy and saying, I know everything about everything on one area and very little on something else, okay? It's almost like cruise control, right? It's like if you think of the modern right now, so like Teslas, right? So it's like cruise control, right? So you're sitting in the car, right? You got to have your hands on the wheel. Look, it can drive itself, but you should still be there, right? You shouldn't be like these idiots where they're like reading a book next to or showing cool stuff on TikTok where they're like laying in the back seat. Look, you should almost be on cruise control during the bar exam itself. You've got it. You've ready. You prepared. Now it's just kind of getting it out there, writing it away. If you properly prepared through essays and PTs, and like I said, so if you're doing 1 or 2 essays right now at this point, you've got about 8 or so weeks. You should have done about 15 or 16 essays. You've done about 5 to 7, 8 or so PTs. You know what it should look like, right? Because if you did proper practice, which again we suggest that every single exam you submit should be like the real thing, okay? No half-assing, no issue spotting, no, I'm only doing 20 minutes, I only have 20 minutes, then don't bother, right? So with our students, when you submitted the exam in, one of our graders is actually going to spend the time, most of our graders spend between 5 and 10 minutes on every single exam that's submitted, because when the exam gets graded, we put the comments on your answer. We give you a feedback form, like a really good detailed feedback form where you can learn from your experience. You got scores, you got a model answer, you have approach sheets, outlines, enough to get you what you need. And at that point, if you did 10 or 15 or 16 or so of those essays, you're going to be in pretty good shape by the time July comes around, okay? Now, if you've already taken the bar exam a few times, don't do the essays on the areas that you know like the back of your head. That's not what this is for, right? And just because you can do 50 or 60 or 100 essays on a bar, it doesn't mean you should. You should do enough to get you past that hurdle. So, for example, let's say on the last bar exam, you got a 55 on a con law question or a PR question, right? So that should probably be an indication that you need a little help on the PR or on the con law, right? So look, you're not going to go from a 55 to an 80. It's just not going to happen. But if you do one question with us, let's say you get a 60 and you do two or so more, and now you're at a 65, and then maybe you're at a 66, 67, that's not a bad spot. You're improving. I think you figured out where you were going wrong, okay? That's the kind of strategy you should be with, right? We suggest that you should be doing at least one or so essay for every single subject, MBEs, and also for California subjects. And we should doing at least 1 to 2 on the PTs, the different kinds of PTs. Now, keep in mind, there are different kinds of PTs. It's not just, oh, I'm going to practice PTs. Look, we have gone through this. We have figured out, okay, so on PTs, there's memos, there's pleadings, there's sometimes these depot evidence kind of ones. There are different kinds, and we've grouped them into different categories because it's important to know how to approach those, right? So again, if you did enough, if you did 5 or 6 or 7 PTs and you had it done with a good bar review like ourselves or someone else similar to us, then you should be okay at that point. Now, look, sometimes you might say, I just don't feel comfortable enough. And sometimes you go to these workshops for the weekend. That's fine. Look, there's no harm in that. But the problem is, what we find is you can't shove every freaking thing in your head in 2 days by Disneyland or some other area and think you've issue spotted 25 different PTs and you're like, yeah, it's so like mind blowing. It's too much, right? We are at a bigger point where we suggest to take it slow, start now where you're in May, do some in May, do some in June, do some in July, and then slowly get ready for the bar exam. So you shouldn't be doing heavy PTs and essays by the time you're in mid-July. That's kind of like too late, right? Now, sometimes you hear these random stories, guys only studied for 3 weeks. Great. Guess what? Those people would have passed no matter what. They could have studied for like 6 hours. They're just going to pass. You have to understand, who are you? What is your issue? Okay? Because it's important to understand that when you are basically figuring out, okay, maybe you took it twice, 3 times, you didn't pass. What is your issue? The minute you can figure that out, the better you are going to get to passing, the faster you're going to get there. And trust me, it's not like, oh, I'm going to pay more money for a bigger bar review. That's going to make me pass. That's not it, okay? It's helping figure out where it is you're going wrong. So like we get a lot of students, they sign up with us and they say, I'm not really sure where I'm going wrong. You know what we say? Let us see your bar exam, okay? So they'll send us their past bar exam, which we include as a free cost to review it. And we go through it. And one of our graders spends like an hour reviewing every single line in your answer, okay? This is something because we're trying to figure out where are you going wrong. And then what we do is we fill out a feedback form, we send to our student, because that's the starting point, right? And sometimes we'll say, okay, I'm going to start writing. And I'll say, wait. Let us review it first and learn from it, okay? Because it's important to figure out where are you going wrong, okay? So it's important to say, okay, so let's say you did those 5 or so essays and you got some on the 60s and some maybe on the 65s and some on the 55s. Look, I would almost say start with the ones in the lower score because, that's probably where your weaknesses are. However, sometimes it's just a one time you got a question and you're freaked out, you had something going on, anxiety or whatever. That's a rarity. But at the end of the day, focusing on where your weaknesses are and then lay it out that way. So for example, someone says, okay, so what subject should I start with on writing essays and then PTs? I'd say, okay, let's look at your past bar exams. Let's see where your scores are. Look, I don't care. We don't care what you did in law school. Law school is a bunch of nonsense. It doesn't matter anymore. That's in the past, okay? So anything in law school, we don't care. The bar examiners don't care, okay? It's out the window. What we care about is actually the essays and PTs of this bar exam and this bar exam world. Okay, now in terms of materials, look, someone says, what kind of books do I need? We're fans of one book. Basically, the Barbary Convisor book is like gold. Okay, you need to memorize it 1 through page 350, whatever, we don't care. But know the right buzzwords on the main areas that they continue to test on. Okay, as Jennifer's saying, let the table of contents be your guide on these essays, okay? When you take your sheet and you have a 2-sided piece of paper that you've done your outline with the mnemonics, you basically have one side. At this point, you should have basically one side for every single subject. Break it down with the 5 to 7 main subject. Okay, put in mnemonics if you have them for each one. Okay, put in the buzzwords next to each one. So hopefully that one-sided piece of paper is done for every single subject, okay? And then what we suggest is basically when we get to like basically mid-June, we say, you know what, that one side, condense it down, okay? And you should be able to. You should be able to take that full one side and make it a half, okay? Because the words, you shouldn't need as many words anymore to remember, right? Because if you reviewed it, if you hand wrote that stuff in or you typed it and you remembered it and you did enough practicing, then it shouldn't be necessary, okay? So then your buzzwords gets less. You have like you don't do is and ands, and who cares, right? You're just putting the buzzwords, okay? Just the words to remember, because it's interesting, as Jennifer is pointing out. Look, these graders, when they're looking at your answers, they know what they're looking for, and they're looking for those buzzwords. They're not looking at every single word. Okay, look, if you're a bad writer and you got a bunch of typos, that's a whole different story. But they're looking for those buzzwords, okay? So part of the way that we find that they're scoring your answer is they're looking for the buzzwords, but they're also looking for a generally good-looking answer, okay? It should look like you are a lawyer, okay? It shouldn't look like a law school answer. It should look like a bar exam / lawyer answer, okay? So basically, what does that mean? Look, everybody knows. It means analysis, okay? It means getting in those buzzwords on the rule, and then when you're going to the A on the IRAC, you're going to analysis the shit out of everything, okay? That means every single word that should be in the question should be somewhat tied in, that's relevant with your rule. So you're bringing it together. You're laying it out nice and clean. Look, if you did enough proper practicing with the main things that they always test on, okay, it shouldn't be that hard, okay? Now, what Jennifer and I had mentioned a while back or so was, okay, before you even start writing that essay, you should spend about 5 minutes with sitting on your hands, okay? You should force yourself to read that question. Read it. Don't start typing. Just keep saying, don't start typing, okay? Just because if you were in the bar exam in the real world, in the non-COVID world, and you be sitting next to someone that be typing really, really fast, look, you're not that person, okay? You're here to pass. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but it doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what those people are doing. What matters is what you're doing, okay? So it's important that you're sitting on your hands. You're basically reviewing the question from top to bottom. You might be starting to circle or in your head the buzzwords. The word should start shooting out to you. But as Jennifer and I pointed out in the past, you're going to look at the call to question. Your answer, when you start outlining before you start typing on your screen, your outlining should basically be in the layout of the question, right? So if call to question says, should he whatever, that's almost your number one that you're writing on your actual outline. And then you're starting to fill in the blanks, right? So that's you're almost outlining from the from the question and putting it as your answer. So it's important to understand these things, that that's your layout, okay? So it's important to know that when you get to the R, okay, now we're going all the way back to mnemonics. We're going to remember our mnemonic for that rule, and we're going to spit it out right then and there. Now, look, before you start writing, you can outline on your answer. That's totally fine. We said that's a good thing. Look, modernly, that's how we do it now. We don't have paper anymore. Who cares, right? So we're typing in our outline on our screen. We're laying it out from basically the way they're giving it to you. They're giving you the one. They're giving you the two questions. You're going to put those on your actual screen. You're going to start outlining with just the mnemonics, if you can, if you have them for all, with just the right buzzwords, and then you're going to the A and you're going to analyze. Now, keep in mind, in terms of the facts, if you are good at this, which you should over time, you should be able to take the right words from the question and write them next to the mnemonic words, right? Or next to the R. So like every time you have a rule, put in the words, the facts that match those rules. So that when you get your analysis and you actually start writing complete sentences, it's already there for you. You're laying it out. All you're doing is like a mathematical equation. You're just laying it out for yourself. Okay, this is the direction you should be heading, okay? Because people freak out. They say, I don't know how to approach. I'm just so fun. It's there. It's already there. They're giving it to you. Just practice this way. Now, look, if this exact way doesn't work for you, great. I don't care. Nobody cares. Find something that's similar to this way that works for you, okay? We're not big fans of memorizing everything from top to bottom because this is the way you should write a defamation answer. It doesn't matter, okay? Find what works for you. So on that note, we're at 6:30. And thank you for listening. And I'll see you soon. Again, barexamdoctor.com.
Thank you, Todd, so much. And I want to tell everyone here that I have 2 of Todd's cards because he gave me flashcards as well. And these 2 saved my butt. One is class actions and the mnemonic is camp. And everybody goes, how do you get camp out of class action, right? Well, commonality is the C. Adequacy and fair representation is A. M is nuMerousity. And T is, the P is typicality because of the T in there. So anyways, that is something that's really a good thing, is that if you can make a mnemonic for class action like camp, or this is another good one, discovery devices. He had index, and I was like, how does he get index out of that? And he says, I for interrogatories, N is for deposition, D is for admissions, the E is for documents, and the X is for examinations. I mean, these are the things that put in your head that, oh my gosh, we've got discovery devices, index, we got class action, camp. So now you break things down into learnable, memorizable cards. And the other thing that I got to tell you is he gave me a stack. And what I did was, when I learned a card, I put it in another stack. When I didn't learn a card, I put it in this stack. I got to look at that again tomorrow. And at the end of the weeks, I could see how many I could go through. Then those are put away. I've got it memorized, and you're done with it. You won't forget it. Not when you have a mnemonic like that. So with that said, I really hope you all have a wonderful week. Thanks again, Todd, for coming. And if you guys have any questions, you know my email. And I hope you have a great night.